All right, it's 1 o'clock, everybody. I hope you had a great stretch, refreshed your tea, had your bio breaks that were needed. Um, yeah, so now we'll be starting on the first presentation, and I see we in the meantime people have shared some pictures in the community meeting. You're looking very comfortable, and yeah, it's great to see more of you. I saw something around 82 now, 82 people, which is just amazing. So I hope the 82 of you that are here will have a great time. And I'd like to give the floor to Sarah. Sarah, are you here?
Hello. So let me put my camera here. I think it's better if you see me rather than just a kind of a black screen. Hello, everyone. It's now up to me, right? Okay, so hello, everyone. I'm Sarah. I'm right now from Paris at home because we have to stay home, not go outside, but it's definitely okay. Very happy to be here with you today and to have this online community meeting. So I would like to start this, maybe my introduction with a thank you. Thank you very much, first of all, to Will, Marlies, and Carolina, and everybody who actually helped preparing this online community meeting very, very quickly. You know, just last week we had to figure out something, and they had actually to figure out something. So thank you very much. So this session is going to be about strategy. We will have two presentations, one from Teemu and the second one from Vivi. During the following 50 minutes, I guess, we are going to talk about the MyData strategy and also the European strategy. So as you may know, last year, exactly at the same day, we launched a work on the vision of success for MyData, a 3 years vision of success, and deriving from this vision of success, we then draw a strategy that will lead us to this success. So Teemu will present you the different actions and the different areas of this strategy for MyData Global. And the second presentation will be about the European data strategy. So you probably have seen some communication from MyData, but also maybe directly from the European Commission website. This European data strategy that was published a few weeks ago, and MyData was actually cited there as a model for a data-driven innovation that will help citizens and organizations and the society. So Vivi will tell us more about this and actually how this links with our own actions as MyData Global. And of course, there is a time for questions and answers. So please do not hesitate to write down your questions in the chat. And I will pick these questions and ask them to Vivi and Teemu by the end of their presentations. So I think that Teemu is going for 15 minutes and then Vivi for 10 minutes, and then we will definitely have time for questions and answers. Right, so thank you everyone once again for being here, and I will give the floor right now to Teemu.
So hi again, and hi to those newcomers. We've again gotten some more during the break. So my name is Teemu. I'm the general manager of MyData Global. And just to open up a few words about MyData and the MyData strategy, and maybe one kind of a mindset to keep or thing to keep in mind, that imagine if you had to go and present MyData and MyData strategy to somebody else. Are you hearing enough that you could present, and what's not unclear? And maybe that will help you put some good, tough questions for us. Great. So, I mean, I think most of us know the core idea of MyData is that us individuals should have the agency, should be able to control data about ourselves. And it's a matter of both digital human rights, but at the same time, we recognize that good business, good innovations, good digital services, good business in the digital domain requires the use of personal data. And as you know, the logo representing, for example, the different domains. By this time of the day, even during the times of lockdown, state of emergency and stay home, we have gathered, personal data has been gathered from our web shopping, our web apps, from our IoT devices, maybe from our self-measurement, so on. Enormous amounts of data. And as mentioned before, the issues of using that personal data require thinking in the business, legal, tech, and society perspectives. The core idea, as you know, the big purpose why we get up and work every day is to work towards a fair, sustainable, and prosperous digital society. A society in which we have a human-centric personal approach to personal data taken into use, and that means that people get value from their own data. People can set the agenda on how their data is used. And at the same time, for organizations, be they in the private sector or public sector, nonprofits, the ethical use of personal data is the most attractive option. And to do this, we have the three fundamental shifts that were outlined in the MyData Declaration. First of all, we need to move from formal to actionable rights, meaning that really the rights, for example, of GDPR should be one-click rights. I should not need to go through hurdles to get myself forgotten or to get my data, to port my data, and so on. Real-time access to these rights. We need to start thinking of us individuals not only as people to be protected, but people to be empowered. By using data from different sources, we can make good things happen. A positive approach to sharing personal data. And then finally, a more fair, open ecosystems in comparison with the closed silos of today, where the big ones, the big tech, wins all. The open ecosystems is not only fair, but it also creates interesting kind of micro ecosystems of companies working together to create services. So what does this mean now in practice? Well, MyData Global, as many of you know, founded a year and a half ago after years of working to bring together the community. It's an international nonprofit headquartered here in Helsinki, Finland. And right now, it's amazing. Over 90 organizations, 56 countries at the moment that we have members from, and a number of 25 local hubs on 6 continents, and great new thematic groups that we work on. We've made a ton of progress. Just fresh in from today, big thanks to Ansku for compiling this. This is the flags of where we have people from, and I will be bet against you that you will not recognize every flag here, and that's good. That tells us that we are really all over the world, from 56 countries at the moment. At the same time, we have a great number of organizations, and we don't even have the logos from all of these, and more joining every week. Actually, some great new announcements coming up. All kinds of organizations, big and small, public sector, private sector, academia. We have cities, startups, ministries, a diverse range of organizations involved. And that's what we need to bring about this change that we are talking about. And these 25 hubs that we have right now globally from around the world. more coming, more interest, and it's great that it's not just a European thing, but rather a global phenomenon. Many of you will have known and seen some of these slides, but this as a background for those who might not have been aware of that. And welcome again. I see again some new people joining the session. So, like Sarah said, we worked on the strategy as a young organization. What is it that we do? I mean, those shifts that we talk about, they are kind of, you could go about them in multiple ways. The key thing for us, for MyData Global and the community we represent, is to accelerate practical advances. So we want to go towards these shifts that we outline in the declaration by developing the skills and knowledge and by building the connections of the people in the MyData community, but also more widely in the digital services industries. Very much a collaborative approach, not an antagonistic, but rather a constructive, collaborative approach. That's the very, very fundamental. So here's what we, summary of what we sketched out over a series of, well, actually many months of work, a summary diagram of, at the top, you see what is it that we're aiming at, and working back from it, what kinds of impact needs to happen along the way for that to happen. So basically you read this from the bottom to the top. So the top is the furthest away, the long-term impact, and towards the bottom of the screen or middle of the screen, more shorter-term impact goals, and then in the bottom, what is it that we actually do? And probably you will not be able to read through all of this. This will, of course, be shared. Just want to say a couple of words about that. So I will actually not even say about the long-term objectives and outcomes for the sake of time, but rather talk about this. So this is the near term what we are aiming at. We have the connecting communities, thought leadership, ecosystem facilitation, outreach and communications impact areas. And what we want to do, what we want to see happen is, first of all, make MyData present and relevant locally, get a common language, get new knowledge and concepts emerging from the community. We want to help build and showcase real cases, examples from the ecosystem. And we want to make sure that the publications we produce become widely known. And they are becoming known because, for example, as you will hear from Vivi, we are in the European Union's data strategy as one example of that, making impact. So what's happened so far? Well, we are starting to make the first steps. This strategy was introduced in Athens community meeting in November. Of course, you will be aware that we had, I'm sorry for some of the text being black and not shown on the screen. We had planned for 4 big events this year. In Rio, in Tokyo, in Berlin, in Nairobi. Of course, these events are all in a little bit of danger right now with the current situation, but that's not all of what's relevant for connecting communities. This, us getting connected, acting together, that's part of the connecting communities as well. In thought leadership, Vivi and others have done amazing work on sketching out what's called the MyData Academy, a training program on MyData. And that is actually one of the key, or actually the key new initiative that's coming out of the strategy. building the skills of people in the industry through a training program on personal data management. It's in early phases still, yes, it's a long-term project, but we've started sketching it out and there is interest. In terms of outreach and communications then, I just want to say a few things. So first of all, the white papers that we have done since 2014, we are very actively doing them now again. Firstly, translating some of the previous white papers into English and into other languages as well. And as was mentioned in the introduction, there was the operator workshop yesterday and the MyData operator white paper coming out in just over a month. In addition to that, the knowledge sharing is happening through webinars that we are organizing monthly. The next one is in just over a week, so I wanted to highlight that, featuring two of our organizational members, Miko and iGrant.io. So the webinars and attracting their new audiences, not only our own community. And then Ansku is compiling, has been working hard to compile a case library, again, making visible the practical advances in the scope of MyData. One of the key things that people ask of us: who is doing it? How are they doing it? Are they making money? What's the benefit? So that's the purpose of the case library, and I can imagine that many of us on the call would have actually cases that we could present. So I ask you to be in touch with Ansku. So that's just to say that we have the strategy out since we are working on refining that to some extent still, but really wanting to get going with that, and that's one of the themes of both today as well as then tomorrow morning. What kind of community action is happening to make the strategy alive, to execute the strategy. If you've not yet done so, of course, I'd like to ask you to sign the MyData Declaration, read some of the papers, join the Slack, and join MyData as a member, as an individual member or as an organizational member. Right now, together, we can be big and powerful and are making impact. So that's it for my session. I hope I was just about on time. I think we have time for a couple of questions, and then we need to go on with the European data strategy.
Yeah, can I put a question?
Oh, yeah, please go ahead.
I'm Peter from the Netherlands. I'm new in this community, but how about Solid? Is Solid part of your movement, or how are you dealing with Solid and the initiative of Berners-Lee?
Peter, that's a great question. In fact, we're continuously in touch with Solid. So the way that they see themselves and we see them is Solid is one kind of technical framework that implements very much the vision of MyData, of individuals being in control. There are other ways of technically implementing similar things, and that's fine. That's the way we want it to be. There are many competitors and different approaches within the community itself. But Solid is very closely connected, and in fact, they were to be presenting at that webinar that I mentioned next week. They will not, but we are otherwise doing a number of things together. So under the big umbrella empowering users and having people more in control working together.
Okay, thank you for your answer, Teemu. I actually have a question. So we are lucky to have a very active community, and we are really thankful for that. So my question to you, Teemu, is how you would like to see the community getting engaged and involved with the strategy?
Thanks. That's a good question. So we will be approving a revision of the strategy in the spring general meeting, which is likely to be in June. And for that time already we have had engagement in different subgroups relating to the academy, relating to the funding, and some other things. On the Slack channel, there is, or in our Slack, there is a strategy channel, and then there are things that are related to some other things like funding, the hubs, and so on. And then specifically, we will tomorrow, when we go through the community in action, also have some asks for the strategy. And some of us will want to talk more about the long-term strategy, and some of us will be more like, well, let's just execute it. And that's great. Both types of people or both types of attitudes are needed, and sometimes they're in the same people as well. One very concrete thing also, Vivi will have one or two very concrete things on the strategy too.
Okay, thank you. And can I ask you maybe regarding the hub leaders, is there anything that you want specifically from the hub leaders, something concrete, a concrete contribution to the strategy?
Yeah, I think especially Sille has been working very much with the hub leaders on kind of hub governance and hub internal regulations, on reworking those. Of course, in addition to that, it's not just about the structure of the hubs, but it's also about what the hubs do. And they definitely want to engage. Not every hub will do the same things as what are like exactly the same things which are on that strategy roadmap, but probably each hub will have some particular interests. One might be more interested in technical projects, and one may be in influencing policy, and that's great as long as we fit into the same big picture. We need different types of roles, and Sille is continuously organizing the hub calls to synchronize on those.
All right, thank you very much, Teemu. We have a question here. Do you foresee actions of how compatibility issues with already existing data platforms?
I'm not seeing the question right now myself.
Maybe we could come back to this question later on, because as I have my eyes on the time, it is now almost the time for Vivi to make the presentation. But Maria, I am not just forgetting your question. I will ask it maybe later, which gives you the time to be maybe more specific on your question, or maybe you would like to ask it yourself later. Okay, so thank you, and now the floor is yours, Vivi.
Thank you so much. So I will share my screen. Okay, let's see. Yeah, so hi everyone. Thank you, Sarah, for facilitating and hosting this session. Thanks, Teemu, for the great intro to MyData Global, as well as our strategy. So my name is Vivi Lähteenoja. and I'm Finnish, as you can tell from the funny name. I'm based here in Helsinki, where our offices are, and I work as the Deputy General Manager for MyData Global. So one of the things that I was involved in recently was getting super excited about the EU data strategy, and doing a bit of reading and thinking and writing on what the data strategy means in relation to MyData in general and MyData Global. We even published a blog post about it, and maybe Silla can share that in the chat, the link to that at some point. But I'll go through the kind of the highlights of that blog post as well now, with some slides. Okay. So the European data strategy was published in February, and it did cause quite a bit of a stir. It's about 34 pages long, and it mentions human, person, individual 65 times. So that's like twice on every page. So the MyData community was and is quite understandably very, very excited about this, we MyData Global were mentioned on page 10, like as I think Sarah mentioned already earlier, and this is just the work of so many people's such hard work over so many years to make this mention happen, that I'm just floored to be able to share this organization, this community, with pioneers who've really made this happen, and really, really grateful to call them collaborators and even friends. And the MyData movement really has been pushing the human-centric agenda onto the EU's legislative portfolio and their funding mechanisms for years now, and now we're seeing the results. So this is really, really exciting stuff. So there's a sense of like really big urgency when you read especially the early bits of the European data strategy. The Commission is very acutely aware that Europe is falling behind competitors to the West and to the East when it comes to the total share of the data economy right now. And there's really, I think, this sense that something needs to change now. And obviously, right, things have just changed dramatically. So the Commission's priorities, like everyone's priorities, are being shifted. But it's important to recognize that data is something that is crucial to actually solving the issues that we're having today with the pandemic and the resulting consequences across societies. So things have changed, but it doesn't mean that this strategy is any less important. So let's go to the next slide. The kind of crown jewel that you must have heard of if you've heard anything about the European data strategy is this idea of a European data space. It's the idea of a space where all data is dealt with in accordance with European rules and European values. And the creation of this European data space is basically the goal of this whole data strategy. So the Commission is using their kind of two methods of creating impact, which are legislation and then channeling funding through their funding instruments into things that they feel are particularly important and strategic at the moment for Europe. So they identified in the beginning 8 areas where progress together is especially needed, and I was personally so pleased to see this word together here, because as Demo was just highlighting, this is what MyData is all about. This is what this community meeting is all about, and this is what this community is all about. It's about working together, because these issues are so complex that there's just no one person, organization, sector, country, region who can actually solve these on their own. So we absolutely must come together. So these are the 8 areas that they identified as needing sort of solutions and progress through collaboration right now. And I won't go through them all, but you will recognize things from the strategy of MyData Global and the goals and ambitions of MyData thinking in general here. So just avoiding silos and making data available, addressing the current imbalance of power between individuals and large platforms, for example. The incredibly important thing that was highlighted, for example, yesterday in the operators workshop of interoperability. There were repeated goals for data governance, for infrastructure, privacy preserving technologies, and then this empowering of individuals to exercise their rights. There are also important advances to be made in skills and literacy and cybersecurity. So what the Commission is proposing to do is to act on 4 lines of action. The first is this kind of cross-sectoral governance framework for data access and use. And I'll just find my notes. So although they talk about this kind of European data space and a cross-sectoral governance framework, there is recognition in the strategy as well about sort of the need for multiple ecosystems to exist within this. So it's not to be a platform to rule or platforms, but rather, as I read it, as I hope others read it as well, a ecosystem of ecosystems. So to create this, the Commission has proposed a Data Act for next year. And that will be one of the really important things that we as MyData Global and as MyData Community can work together and influence to make sure that those human-centric values that we believe in are also at the heart of this new Data Act. And the principle which they highlight for this Data Act will be to facilitate voluntary data sharing. And data sharing is something that, as long as it happens on my terms when it comes to data about me, that's exactly what we want. And I'll briefly say about this as well that we obviously the European Commission can do work on the legislative side, but as Demo mentioned before, I think it's a unique power of this community is that we do combine the whole BLTS stack. So also businesses, also technologists, also social scientists, policymakers on all levels of society. The second kind of line of action that the EU data strategy proposes are investments in capabilities and infrastructures for data and for interoperability. And over here, there's a mention of personal data spaces as well, and I'll elaborate a little bit more on those in the next section. But this is basically, the Commission's way of saying we're going to put our money where our mouths are. The third kind of line of action is this focus on competence. So this is about empowering individuals, investing in skills, and also investing in SMEs. So that's small and medium enterprises. And over here, especially on the issue of empowering individuals, we come back to what Demo was saying about the one-click rights, about like the current lack of tools and ways of people really to exercise their rights in a way that benefits them, in a way that they can have agency and they can gain value from their data or data about them in the way that they want. And here also in this this section was the elaboration on these personal data spaces that I alluded to before. So there are plans to consider some rules for providers of such personal data spaces, which would guarantee their role as neutral brokers. And the now often mentioned MyData Operators Working Group or thematic group that met already yesterday, they are one of the key initiatives within MyData Global to really affect the Data Act that's coming next year in order to shape these kind of personal data space facilitators in this human-centric way and according to these values. And then over here as well,
Vivi?
when it comes to, yeah?
Sorry, just a quick warning about time.
Okay, thank you. I'll be super quick. So investing in skills, we have the MyData Academy, Tim talked about it. So this is an initiative geared towards equipping personal data professionals in trusted personal data management. So this is a key initiative for MyData Global, which is very much in line with what the Commission is proposing. And then the final bit, which I'll go through really quickly, is these sectoral data spaces. So on the road to creating this one common European data space, the plan is to set up data spaces in these specific sectors. And there's a lot of activity in MyData in, for example, mobility, in health especially, and also other sectors enumerated here. So I'll just stop with this is my penultimate slide, with two things that I want to lift up are quotations from the strategy itself. So in a society where individuals will generate ever-increasing amounts of data, the way in which data are collected and used must place the interests of the individual first, in accordance with European values, fundamental rights and rules. And they go even stronger in the very last bit, is that the European Commission's vision stems from European values and fundamental rights and the conviction that the human being is and should remain at the center. And this is what MyData is all about. So I'll give it to you, Sarah.
Okay, thank you very much, Vivi, for this great presentation. So now go in with some questions. Teemu, would you like actually maybe to bring up the discussion that you had with Maria and some other participants regarding the infrastructure and the fact that MyData is or not a platform and how it has to cope with the MyData approach?
Sure. So just elaborating that a little bit and of course simplifying. Oh, I'm sorry, I switched off the video. So MyData in itself is not a company or is not a product, but rather in the community there are multiple companies that kind of do, if I can say, building blocks of the world that acts according to the MyData principles. And for that, we need things like what we call the MyData operator. So making sure that personal data can be shared and personal data and related things like consents to use that can be shared between different types of players. And this is exactly what the personal data space is about, and it's what the MyData operators is about. So I hope that answered at least a bit regarding the earlier question from Maria.
All right, Thank you, Teemu. So we have also a question from Will regarding the infrastructure, and maybe the question is to clarify what does the European Commission intend by infrastructure, as it sounds a bit like NGI activities in the last decade. Any answer? Idea?
Yeah, so infrastructures is something that runs through the entire strategy document. There's governance, tools, infrastructure, and technologies. Those are kind of like buzzwords that run through the entire strategy. It doesn't go into very much detail into what that will actually look like. So one of the key things that I didn't mention earlier was this setting up of European cloud services, so cloud, sort of this pan-European cloud with European data being hosted in Europe. So I think that is kind of like the key part of the infra that they are talking about. I don't know enough about the NGI's activities to compare to that, but that's what I would say from a reading of the strategy itself. That makes sense.
Okay, thank you very much, Vivi. So John actually added a comment here. The new Data Act is an opportunity to address the fundamental problem with notice and consent at scale as a dark pattern and fundamentally anti-MyData. I don't know if John would like maybe to take the floor and tell us more about this new Data Act and how it is an opportunity.
Hey everyone.
Hello.
I can't speak to the Data Act specifically because I'm not in the loop on the drafting or the, but any new privacy related or data related act needs to be run through the filter of current capabilities, whether it's in Canada, US, or Europe. The old notice and consent system, based in a 1970s version of walled castles of min and lab coats with mainframe computers that can guard your data, is so out of date as to be older than I am. So, if we're doing new governance and new legislation for data, this is a great opportunity for the MyData organization and the MyData policy wonks to start articulating a position that says, that basically says, while legislation should be technology neutral, it shouldn't be technology blind, which is, and recognize that notice and consent at internet scale, we all know that that's broken. I mean, as part of the Cantera initiative, I'm one of the editors and wrote the consent receipt specification so we can build some accountability into notice and consent. But a MyData approach doesn't involve consent, where you cede control of your data to some custodian who can change the terms of that at will. So a MyData approach has the algorithm or the seeker of processing coming to either a data trust controlled by the individuals, the MyData operator, where the individual never has to cede control, which is what the consent is. And that, it seems to me, is a great opportunity for us to present through white papers and lobbying to the EU legislative process to say, if you're going to do a data act, let's center it at the individual. So that's the long version of that.
Okay, thank you very much, John. So we have two other people who would like to also comment. Vivi, can I just maybe give the floor for a few seconds to Maria? Maybe she would like to specify her question. So Maria, if you hear me,
there's
yes.
construction going on here. This is why I'm not sure I can talk all the time. My idea is that since there is this opportunity now with opening up data and the great value adding of personal data that this component, we really need to make sure that there is enough trust and enough legal framework to protect these data, but we really need it because the added value of being able to link that to existing data sets that are collected from public organizations or from private companies is great. This is what I wanted to say, that the interoperability and the let's say the possibility to be given to people to share their data in a trusted way. If all of us could somehow have the infrastructure, the skills and the processes to upload our data regarding COVID-19, then a solution would be found much quicker.
Right, thank you, Maria. So Vivi, you wanted to share something, and then I think that Yogi would like to react on the strategy and also maybe the European strategy too. So then Yogi, you can take the floor right after Vivi.
Thanks. I think Yogi is only in listening mode. I don't know, but we'll try. I just wanted to make a quick comment on the Gaia X that's mentioned in the chat. So as far as I understand, Gaia X is a German initiative, and what the European strategy and Commission tries to do is to coordinate national initiatives like Gaia X, so that we can have a European cloud structure, rather than the Gaia X being one-to-one what the strategy is actually talking about. So yeah, that was just my comment, that that Gaia X isn't mentioned or isn't the cloud thing that the strategy is talking about, but it hopes to be, the Commission hopes that it's a part of it. Yeah, Yogi, are you able to speak at the moment? Oh.
Yeah, I can speak for a moment. Ona is sleeping, so. By the way, I have this virtual background of
yes, very nice.
Finland. So if you wish to improve the privacy of your family members, etc., there is this option in Zoom. But yeah, regarding the strategy, I recommend highly that everybody downloads the document and goes to page 20 and reads the upper part of page 20. So I think there are some sentences that are very important for MyData. So it says that this kind of third parties, or what we call MyData operators, may need some sort of regulation. And it's very lightly hinted there, but it's said that if this regulation will be, then it could be part of the Data Act that Vivi said that will be prepared already 2021. So this is our opportunity also to influence. I think we as a community mostly support for having regulated environment for this kind of intermediaries, because it can get really wild west if there is no regulation, but the devil is always in the details, so what kind of regulation. So that's something to bear in mind. Then it also says in the same paragraph something that our board member Julian Ranger has very many times indicated that is needed. There is the European data portability clause in the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, Article 20, and that's not good enough for having good APIs, and it hints that it could be changed. And then third thing that is mentioned there is also personal data spaces as a term, and I think we should, as a community, very clearly kind of tie MyData terminology to the EU terminology of the data spaces. So those are kind of the lobbying hints, and this might sound very European centric. It is, because it's a European data strategy, but this has also a global perspective. We can, for example, bring in experiences from Japan, from the data banking there, and on the other hand, what's happening in Europe can influence what will be done in other parts of the world. So those are kind of the reading hints for the strategy.
Okay, thank you very much, Yogi, for your comment, and thank you everybody for participating. The discussion is really great, and I see that there are other comments going on, but unfortunately we are already running out of time and I have to close the session. So I would like to thank Teemu and Yogi for their great presentations and everyone who participated to this session and took part to the discussion. Thank you very much, and please do not leave, because we have another session that will be starting in 8 minutes actually. So we have a break right now and give maybe the floor to Marlies. Yes. Thank you, and talk to you soon.
Yes,
and
thank you, Sarah, Vivi.
Let's thank Vivi also for the presentation.
I said Vivi and Teemu.
Also,
Vivi and Yogi.
I said Yogi? Oh,
you
sorry.
It's all right. We both got long hair.
All right. Okay. So I just want to emphasize, if you liked what you saw, if you're interested, it's super easy to get involved with MyData. Just join the Slack, and there is bound to be a channel that has a theme that interests you. And if not, you can even make it yourself. There's calls every time. Be sure to get engaged. So after the break, we'll have a presentation by Wil Jansen. He'll be sharing the concepts and ideas from our view of the personal data landscape, which has developed through several years of research at Innovator. We've been studying the Netherlands, but also initiatives internationally, and he'll be giving an overview. But before that, take a break, please. Get up from the PC again, pet your cat, go out, get a drink, and I'll see you back at 2 over here.